welcome back. So in the last lecture we had talked about the use value and non-use value of environmental goods. Now the point is to how to undergo the valuation of these environmental goods. We have categorized them into various types of use and non-use value in the last lecture, but now the point is how to do the valuation of these particular kinds of goods. The theoretical framework for defining the non-use value is based on defining in terms of the purchase of market goods. There are no goods, for example, like inside all the environmental goods, we do not have markets. That is the main point of concern. Because we do not have markets, so we need to look at market goods and the purchase of market goods. Somehow these market goods should be in a way associated with the type of goods which we are talking about, where we do not have markets. Most common approach is to locate some market good or services that are complementary to the resource or environmental good. For example, if the resource is a park, then the complementary good is the purchase of travel services to the park. Now, purchase of travel services to the park is complementary to the park itself. Use of these resources is now measured by the number of trips you're making to the park or you're buying to visit the park. So that will be considered as a complementary to the good to the park which there is no value to it. According to the typical approach or in the literature of valuation, use value, economic value is the only method or measurement or parameter to understand the value. But we do not have economic value to the environmental goods. Therefore, we look at different ways of valuing it. For example, through the visit to the recreation sites like wildlife sanctuary, or observing a natural wildlife population. So how do you value them? An individual's willingness to pay can be considered as one of the methods of valuing them, to preserve and to maintain that resource in the present state, in future, and that is called as total value. A person is willing to pay, whatever amount person is willing to pay to preserve it. That can be considered as the total value. But if that total value exceeds the use value, the difference is considered as non-use value. And that non-use value can be classified as intrinsic value, preservation value, it can be called as in any name. Different authors have defined it differently. So if we look at it can be looked at in many ways. If there is a complementary market that exists, market good that exists, that can represent the use of some of the assessment can be done about the environmental good, looking at the complementary good, then the value of the resource can be revealed from the observable market demand of that complementary good. Like I said, visit to the park. But in the case that it is a weak complementary, then the information derived from the market can reveal everything about the existence of the market or the resource. In order to value those resources which do not require the purchase of complementary goods, one method is the requisite proximity, a characteristic of some houses in the residential housing area. In such a case, hedonic property valuation method is used, which can be used to know about the use value of the environmental good. We will shortly talk about the valuation methods step by step. Now you can so the valuation of environmental goods can be described in two ways. One is the revealed preference method. The other one is the stated preference method. Under the revealed preference method, there are two methods: hedonic production function approach, and the household production function approach. Under the household production function approach, there are further two methods. One of the variety is a household health production function, and the other one is travel cost method. Under the stated preference, contingent valuation method is there. So we will go through all the valuation methods one by one. So we pick up the first kind of method of valuation of environmental goods, method of valuation, that is revealed preference. Environmental goods are valuable and they are useful for all economic agents. They are living in the society, but do not have any well-defined markets. So this non-existence of the market of these goods creates a problem of measuring the demand of these environmental goods. There are two basic approaches to measuring the demand for environmental goods. First approach is the revealed preference, which we were talking about. The real choice is here under the revealed preference approach. Real choice of the is observed in the prevailing markets, that you will decide about the trade-off between money and the environmental goods, and that is inferred demand. For example, it is possible that if there are two identical communities in your area, but they have different characteristics of prices. For example, that there are two identical communities with different house prices. These high house prices are associated with the cleaner air, while the other set of community has high prices, house prices, but with a lower quality of environment. That reflects the difference in the air quality in these two communities. So such a kind of is considered as a revealed preference. Then which one you are choosing, which community are you choosing for housing purpose, that is giving an idea about the revealed preference. That is considered as revealed preference theory. Under the stated preference approach, this method involves creating the superficial markets or hypothetical markets by asking people around the trade-off between the money and the environmental goods, if they are given a chance to value. So in this we create experimental labs, or sometimes we create surveys, and these are creating the hypothetical markets. There are various methods in order to take the account of the trade-off between monetary value and the environmental good or characteristic. Opinion polls and surveys are conducted under this method, and this will come under the stated preference approach. Experience exhibits these experimental markets. They exhibit approach which is sometimes controversial. Many economists, environmental economists, have critically objected under this approach, because these choices are not real choices. People have been paid to make these choices, and there is no actual trade-off happening between the environmental good and money, but it is superficial and hypothetical. The choices are hypothetical, but the information about their demand, demand is the choices are actually considered as hypothetical because the market is not actually existing. That is why it is being refuted by a lot of economists, this particular method. And we'll see that what all further criticisms are associated with this method. There exists a great deal of debate and controversial among the economists to accept this method of valuation. The choices are not real, they are hypothetical first of all, and then the existence of experimental markets, they reflect the characteristic of both approaches. The experimental markets, people are given money and they are asked to make their choices. As a result, in such cases, the decisions are real, but the actual choices are unreal. The decision which they make is reflecting a lot of things, but the trade-off is unreal, right? So you're given money, and one spending money on its own. These two cannot be compared. So we'll start with the revealed preference theory. in the revealed preference theory, we have two ways of measuring. One is the hedonic production function approach, and the other one is household production function approach. Hedonic function approach is the aim to observe how the prices of a usual marketable good, example the price of house, varies with a closely related environmental good like air quality around the location of a house. The relationship between the house and the air quality around that house is then used to measure the value of environmental good, that is air quality. So suppose we take air quality as an environmental good. How do you measure air quality? What is the method? So the method is you pick up housing and you try to see what valuation of houses, because we have existing market for houses, and air quality is one of the attribute of house, characteristic of house. So if you value a house, then you're indirectly valuing the air quality. That is the method in the hedonic function approach. In this method, price of the commodity is a function of characteristics it possesses. For example, land has different characteristics in terms of location, size, and environmental quality in its vicinity. Similarly, different jobs have different characteristics, for example, risk involved, job accidents, training, enhancement of skills, local environmental quality, etc. So there are different attributes which do not have market, but they're still associated with some marketable good. So by observing the changes in the price of the marketable good with respect to the changes in the characteristic of the good, an economic agent pays a price or a premium for the particular characteristic. This creates underlying notion or proposition of hedonic approach. Various environmental characteristics like air, water quality affect the price of the good, like land, houses. Under this, consider a good that with a single characteristic, for example, consider houses only, and with the different levels of characteristics such as number of rooms, pollution levels, which involving different price structure. So it has a market, and deducing the consumer's willingness to pay for changes in the characteristic, one can indirectly assess the value it is placing to the attribute. Now in this, suppose you consider different levels of characteristics, number of rooms, etc., and you identify a homogeneous set of houses, then you can have an assessment about the house. Each house has a characteristic which is single variable Q, which is the air quality. The aim is to find out price related to that Q, environmental quality. How to find out that price of the, so now the price of the house will convey a lot of things. Price of the house varies with the pollution levels. In order to find PQ, price of the environmental quality, we need to consider both the consumer side and the producer side. Here we are using the fundamentals of economics to find out valuation. We assume that the market is competitive from both producers and consumer side. Now I will first begin with the consumer side. Consider a consumer with a utility U and an income M. The consumer buys one house, and that house is associated with the quality, air quality Q. Now give the value to that house as environmental good, that is Q, and there is another, the price is for that house, consumer good house, is there is a nominal price to that, and 1. So you can easily set up a maximization utility function given by U, which is a function in X and Q, and you maximize the amount of money you maximize. Now here we assume that lambda is the maximum amount of money the consumer is ready to bid for the utility U star. So we do the same maximization of utility, set up that utility maximization criteria, where your utility is a function of the private good house X and the environmental quality Q. Your aim is to maximize U star and subject to the budget constraint. So what you are going to do, your objective will be to maximize lambda such that U X, which is a function of X and Q, is subject to the budget constraint. Here the budget constraint will be X plus lambda equal to M. X is the quantity you purchase of the house, and the price of house is considered as 1. Lambda is the bid price, and then that is equated to the money income. Consider consumer with the utility. Now with this we derive the whole Lagrangian problem, and then we come up with the bid function. The bid function is reflected by lambda, which is a function of money income M, Q and U star, which is called as a bid function for a particular achieving the particular utility U star. Now this lambda will reflect the amount which you are bidding for the air quality Q. If this exercise is repeated for all the consumers, then we can derive a bid function altogether. Consumer's problem is to obtain the level of air quality Q that maximizes the utility. Thus, we will obtain a price line which is given by PQ, so that the optimal point of the consumer is the point at which bid function is tangent to the price function PQ. So this is how we find the equilibrium from the consumer's point of view. If we look at producer's point of view, then there are several producers and they have set of cost functions related to the house. We're talking about the house itself. Different producers have different cost structure. The producers specialize in different characteristics of the house. Some of the producers will be providing kitchen sets in a very optimal manner. Some of them will be providing a good infrastructure within, the wooden architecture. So all of them have speciality in some way or the other. If we consider a producer with a given cost structure, assuming it follows a constant returns to scale, therefore deriving the cost of producing one house of characteristic Q will be our main aim. So if the producer offers a price alpha, then the profits per house are given by pi. If we consider pi as a profit, then alpha minus the cost. And what is the cost of the producer? It is the function in the labor used and the environmental quality, because environmental quality comes with a cost. So it is CWQ. So if we derive the profit, this is alpha minus CWQ, that is cost function. And so from here, given one level of, if you have fixed a level of profits here, then you derive alpha from here. So alpha will become the offer price of the producer. The producer is ready to offer alpha, which is coming at a function of W, which is the labor cost, Q, environmental quality, and pi, a given level of profits. So that's how you derive alpha through the producers, and that is considered as offer price. Now we have two equilibrium points. One is from the consumer side, that is bid function. The one is the offer function from the producer side. So from consumer side it is bid function, from producer side it is offer function. Both of them have to be equated. If the producer really wants to sell the house, then offer curve should intersect the price line at a point. That is the equilibrium in a market. So what are we doing? We are actually deriving the equilibrium for the houses, because we do not have the air quality market. That is why we are doing the complementary market, which is house. House is a complementary market. So like with the help of the attributes, we are deriving the demand for the house. Finally, the two offer curves, they will intersect, producer side and the consumer side, attaining the equilibrium, and this tangency point would imply slope of the offer curve of the producer is equal to the bid function of a consumer, which is eventually equal to the slope of the price function PQ, which indicates how much price goes up when the air quality Q changes by 1 unit. That is how we've derived the air quality price or the demand function for air quality. This was all about the hedonic price function method. Now, household production approach starts with the notion of environmental good do not have markets of their own. So the consumers therefore continue with the consuming the good along with the environmental good to produce another good. For example, the national park could be combined with the expenditure to visit the park in order to generate a park visit which is highly valued. So we will look for the complementary goods here. Therefore, the visit of the national park is worth the travel expenditure you make, the least travel expenditure you make to that park. So that is how you find out the valuation of the natural park. By observing the expenditure on the complementary good, which is a private good in nature, we derive the lower bound of the value of that environmental good. One of the version of household production function is the household health production function, which can be used to estimate value households place on the benefits of reduced morbidity and mortality. Like by improving the air quality, you are reducing the expenditure on your health, which you were earlier getting affected because of air pollution. So how much valuation you give to that, that is what we are trying to capture due to the reduction of the air and water pollution. When the health changes occur as a result of environmental factors, the change in the productivity also occurs, and that can be measured and valued. And another method related to this is the travel cost method. In this method, the utility of an individual depends on the total time at the park, how much time you've spent in the park, in the natural area, the quality of that location, and the quantity of the composite private good other than travel, with the duration of the travel as fixed, and the time spent in the location is represented by the number of visits you're making. So everything is conveyed, that how much visits are you making to that area, how much time are you spending there, all this being captured by this model. The individual maximizes then the utility function, which is a function of X, R and Q, which is subject to the budget constraint. Here you do the same thing, you maximize utility subject to the budget constraint. Budget here is something which one should understand. How do you calculate the budget for this particular model? It is the money which you have, exogenous income which you have, and then the wages which you earn, and then also it is multiplied by the total discretionary time you have. The total amount of income you have is measured by the money income plus the income you earn out of that discretionary time you spend in the natural resource. That is equated to the amount of expenditure you do on the private good, which is Px into X, plus PR into R. R is the number of visits you are making to that recreation site. So if you multiply that PR, what is PR? PR is the price to that visit, and when you take the equate the expenditure side and to the money income, that becomes your budget line. So subject to that budget line, you maximize utility, and then you derive the demand function for that particular wildlife sanctuary or national park. So this is all about this. The final thing is the stated preference. In this regime, The stated preferences most are in terms of contingent valuation method. Again, as I already discussed, that it is about the creating the fake markets on the basis of the survey and other things. You create fake markets, and these are called as constructed markets and survey-based designs, and you try to infer about the placement of the trade-off between the environmental good and the money spent. So these are fake, but they try to infer about the choices of the people in place. So this was all about the stated preference market. They are also called as laboratory experimental markets, and the surveys are conducted in the random selection samples, where you talk about maybe it could be random and non-random. So this was all about the valuation of environmental goods. We started the entire lecture stating that what is the reason that environmental goods should be valued. They are valued as use value, non-use value, and finally, what is the valuation? There are various methods of valuation of environmental goods, and they should be valued. It is the right time when one should think about the valuation of environmental goods. They are equally significant in the era of climate change. So thank you so much for having patience and having me in this lecture. Thank you.